Hello, everybody. How are you doing? It has been a fascinating weekend, of course, because we actually managed to see some football. And on that, I wanted to start with because I wanted to give you my impressions of that first weekend in the Bundesliga. Let's not forget, and this is important for the bigger picture, that Bundesliga will play only one game a week, which means that they will have a lot of time to recover. It won't happen in Italy, it won't happen in England, it won't happen in Spain, which changes things dramatically, really. Having spoken to La Liga managers, they realize that they are at a disadvantage, having to do a game every 3 days, which means that they cannot learn so much from the Bundesliga. Some of it, yes, the protocol, the fact that there were 8 injuries in the first 6 games, and I think 2 or 3 as well on Sunday, means that it is to be expected. There's a report that can be applied from what has happened this weekend into La Liga, into the Premier League, into Serie A. There's a report that was done when I think it was the MLS for 4 months and a half were no games because of a dispute. And as a consequence, when they came back, rushing the players a little bit, perhaps, even though there were time to prepare them, but they didn't know the length of it, or perhaps they hadn't calculated what it meant to have 4.5 months of not proper training. What happened was there were serious Achilles tendon injuries, 12 of them in the first 2 weeks. And that was a regular, an average of 5 per season, the previous 6 seasons. So cruciates could be a real danger, and generally the managers in Spain realize that the work that they've done all these months for preventions of injuries doesn't count for anything right now. So yes, injuries we saw in the Bundesliga. We also saw a lack of rhythm, normal, and some players out of form, expected. But what happens when you are unable to produce the kind of rhythm that makes your team play in the way that you want is that it ends up being less about the team, less about the collective, more about the quality, the individual quality. That's perhaps what we're going to see. I don't think anybody's going to be able to put the kind of rhythm that makes teams that we adore and like watching able to do what they do. From Bayern Munich to Borussia Dortmund, then you jump to Manchester City, Liverpool, I don't know, Sevilla, even Getafe. They all have a way of playing that has to do with a high tempo and constant tempo. But they won't be able to do that, especially, as I say, because having had 2 games per week means that they're going to have to make 5 or 6 changes per game. So it is completely new. I think it was the Hertha Berlin manager that said that it's like piloting a plane with your eyes closed. They don't know where they're going because it's a completely new situation to them. But you could see all those things. The lack of fans, which is necessary, of course, means that the individual pretty moves don't get appreciated so much. And the fans have got a lot of influence in what happens on the game. From the moment that when you concede a goal and what happens straight after, when you score a goal and what happens straight after, the minutes before a game. As I say, the looking for those pretty moves that players enjoy, the gratification of getting fans, clapping them and enjoying them. All that is gone, but we have to accept what it is, and I think we're all in agreement that as an industry, football had to come back. I know that there is a lot of concerns about the health of the players, but we said here before, the ones that will be on the pitch will be the healthiest people in the world because they would have passed so many tests. And there was, in the case of Germany, 1 week before the start, they met and isolated in a hotel for a week. I think that's what La Liga would like to do. The Premier League hasn't discussed that properly yet, but they'll have to. And the same with Serie A. They even suggested in Serie A to do it for the whole of the tournament, or what's left of the tournament. Anyway, some of it has to happen. But then the players in Spain don't want to do that for the whole month and a half of games. So there are risks, but they will keep being tested. And if you follow the procedures of social distancing and cleaning your hands, etc., plus the tests, everybody admits that there shouldn't be any infections during training or during games. We will see. In any case, it was a joy to see a ball moving, and it was a joy to see some of the players. But it is we're entering a completely different world, one that we're not used to, and we will have to get used to, because this is going to go on for a long while. Anyway, let's go into the questions. I've got here from Frank Constancio: where is the next destination of Mauricio Pochettino and his staff? Starting with that's too strong a start. Should we leave it for a little bit later? We'll come back to this one. Right. What are your thoughts on Griezmann in a player swap deal with Neymar? The problem, let's see, Barcelona, yes, will be happy to get a deal for Neymar. That means swapping players. And Barcelona would like Dembélé to be part of that deal. But PSG right now are showing no interest in Griezmann and no interest in Dembélé. Plus, to do this kind of swap deals in which you have to have a relationship, a proper relationship with the club that you're doing that with, has to be a good relationship. So Barcelona has got a good relationship with Inter, with Juventus, with perhaps Manchester City, not so much with PSG. So Barcelona have got the possibility of getting Neymar in pause. They reckon that let's see if there is an opportunity to do so later, perhaps just before the end of the transfer window or something like that, because right now it's not possible. And what Barcelona don't want to do is to actually apply the FIFA ruling by which you could get Neymar a little bit cheaper, because a tribunal will determine the money to pay to PSG depending on the years of contract, etc. So Barcelona have said we won't do that, and it will be a matter of swapping players, because Barcelona needs to raise now still 70 million euros. 70 million euros for the accounts to be where they want them to be. That goes to something that it's been published in Sport. Hamid Said mentions, says, how much euros will Barcelona be able to spend this summer, including revenues from sale of the following players: Semedo, Coutinho, Rakitic, Vidal, Umtiti, Todibo, Emerson, Rafinha, Aleñá. Basically, as I said, Barcelona have to raise 70 million euros. That could be cash, or it could be in values of players that are coming in swaps that are beneficial economically to Barcelona. And that goes to the story that I retweeted from Sport. There is an agreement between Juventus and Barcelona. There is an agreement by which Juventus and Barcelona have agreed a value of players. And now they have to agree which players are the ones that are going to go one way or the other. Some of them, as I'm going to explain now, have already agreed, and Barcelona have advanced those negotiations. But there is a big difference in which has to be the key player that goes from Barcelona to Juventus. So let me explain. Sport said Semedo will be in exchange of Di Siglio, the right back, Pjanic, and 25 million euros. My understanding is that the figures are not exactly that. My understanding as well is that two things. One, the player that Juventus wants is Arthur. Arthur is the player that they want. And basically Barcelona have said everybody apart from De Jong, Ter Stegen and Messi, they're all for sale. And basically the list of players that Barcelona have shown Juventus, Juventus decided that out of those lists, they wanted Arthur, basically. Now, Barcelona were thinking, how about Semedo, and basically plus a little bit of money as well, as it's a young player, one that has got room for improvement. Pjanic, of course, is 30. Di Siglio is 27, if I'm not mistaken. So that's at the point that I understand the negotiations are at. Sport published that it was Semedo, and once they published it, which was part of the negotiations, the kind of conversations that they have in Semedo, Arthur, the consequences has been that Barcelona got a little bit upset that the story was out there, not because it was false, but because perhaps they're not at the stage of saying that everything is confirmed. There is an agreement between the clubs that a swap can happen, and the value of the players that will go one way or the other. On that, Barcelona have got an agreement with De Siglio and also with Pjanic in terms of personal terms, but Semedo has not agreed anything yet. Jorge Mendes, who is an expert on these things, is his agent, so he could make things happen, but Semedo hasn't said yes or no. That's the part of the deal that is not done yet. And Arthur has said he doesn't want to go to Juventus. He wants to stay. So even though there is an agreement between the clubs, you have to have everybody. That's why it's so difficult for these things to happen. You have to have everybody saying yes. There's still plenty of time. Interestingly enough, the president of Barcelona not only wants the sporting directors of the club to actually get deals that benefit financially Barcelona. They need that because they need those 70 million. But also they want to do it quickly to then focus the attention, perhaps even taking some of the money that's come from that deal from Juventus to use it for Lautaro Martinez. They have an agreement with Lautaro Martinez, Barcelona, and it's just a matter of convincing Inter and swapping players as well, plus a little bit of money. But they need that money to be able to do that deal. So still things up in the air, but Bartomeu would like this to happen quickly, even before the beginning of the last 11 games of La Liga, which, as it looks like, it could be the 12th of June, perhaps the 19th, 12th or 19th. So that's the situation right now. And as I said, because everybody, that list of players that you put in, yes, they are all for sale or, they're willing to let them go, but it's not going to be easy as I've just described. Jim McIntosh is saying a loan club for Bale, 2 years left on contract, but bridges must be burned. Such an exciting player, but his massive wage puts him out of reach of 99% of teams. And that goes back to the story has been doing the rounds that Newcastle are after him. First of all, Newcastle haven't confirmed that they've been sold. That is obviously key. Secondly, Bale doesn't have an interest right now in going to Newcastle, even if it happens. And then, yes, it's true that there will be a limit because of the financial fair play. What's interesting in the last couple of days is that Ceferin, the head of UEFA, has said that they will be quite flexible on how financial fair play will be allowed, which may obviously should benefit Newcastle if the sale goes through. In terms of coaches, we can go back. Well, that's the story basically. The Bale is not interested in going to Newcastle. But there are other players like Cavani, finishing contract, James, who Real Madrid want to get rid of, that they may be able to convince. That they're going to have to be clever in the market because they will have money and will be one of the few clubs that will have money, mostly from the Premier League, Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United, Newcastle. That will be about it, the ones that will spend money. They will have to be clever about how they use that money. And that could be a way just to get loan deals, like could get James on loan. Real Madrid will be happy to do so if they pay his wages or most of it. Cavani, you get something like that, and then you're talking about serious business. Newcastle being entering the equation of big deals, not massive financially for the reasons I've told you, financial fair play. I reckon they can spend 30 million euros, at least I've been told, the first 3 years, with the flexibility of course, see what happens with what Ceferin has said, but also the possibility of bringing money into the club and do it in a clever way, which means that margin could be improved. But we're talking about not huge amounts, but you can go for a Cavani. The Robinho of Manchester City, when he came to Manchester City from Madrid, it cost 42 million euros cash, and Real Madrid said all yours. But Newcastle could enter the equation like that with a Cavani, for instance, if they convince him, if they get him big wages. He's over 34 now, I think, Cavani, 33. And Atletico Madrid would like to convince him, but Newcastle can take advantage of it if everything goes through. And staying with Newcastle, just to insist on the idea that right now, Pochettino knows that Newcastle want him as the number one choice, knows that. I believe, I've been told, there hasn't been contacts, as in exchange of numbers. This is what we will pay you. That's what I believe. That's what I've been told. It will happen, of course, but to convince Pochettino, you have to be serious. You have to go and say, look, has happened already. You can tell him now it may happen. You can tell him now how the plan could be. But you have to have the club to be able to say, we want you to be the number one. And then, and this is my own thinking, this is not having asked Pochettino or his entourage. This is my thinking. There'll be a choice. Do you want to wait for a club like, say, PSG, Bayern, Juventus, Manchester United, Manchester City, after Pep Guardiola leaves? Do you wait for them and see what happens? Because none of those clubs, and those are the clubs that Pochettino obviously had an eye on, will need a coach straight away, not for a bit. Do you wait for it? Or do you start working with a Newcastle project that you can build on and work on? I'm sure they've got full of energies, and I'm sure that it will be proposed to them. I'm convinced about that. It is the number one choice for Newcastle. And having given that choice, what do you do? And then we'll have to see. I really think that having done and spending so much energy on building your prestige, your career with Spurs, the next step, the next logical step should be to go a step further, not to go back to the beginning of the Spurs story, a step further. But it depends how nervous, tense, anxious to come back Pochettino is. Everybody will do what he says, around him, of course. And it will have to be a matter of, seeing if it's something that is worthwhile waiting for. And I do believe that if he waits for it, his prestige won't change. He will still be considered. He's done a magnificent job, portrayed in a great book. So you've got that possibility of waiting, but again, it depends on how anxious he is to return. As I said, they've got the energy to build again from scratch almost. Obviously, Newcastle is not scratch, but it's a completely different way of thinking about the club. And he will have all the support of everybody, and he'll manage to do whatever he wants with the club. That's the attraction. Or you wait. That's the situation. Francisco Castelo Branco says why Nelson Semedo have failed in the Camp Nou. I don't think he particularly has failed, but Barcelona is used to very top fullbacks that make a difference, and he didn't do it often enough. The runs forward weren't as often as you get Jordi Alba or Dani Alves. The defending was good, was decent, but again, to measure fullback in Barcelona, you have to be offensive as well and quite clearly create links with Messi, for instance, that work. And that we haven't seen often enough. Hence, sometimes even Sergio Roberto being used in that position. So not a failure, but it seemed like there wasn't much more that he could add to the team. Hence, and the financial situation, why Barcelona are actually trying to sell him. Finally, T-Boys K says, with David Silva leaving at the end of the season, will Pep look for a replacement, or does he believe in Phil Foden? Also, which league do you think will return the earliest next? Well, I think the Serie A could be delayed. The latest are here, as the protocol hasn't fully been agreed. Once the Premier League agrees the protocol, that could go mid-June. And I think La Liga are insisting on the 12th of June because they seem to be wanting to please the broadcasters. And the broadcasters want it to happen on the 12th of June or even the 11th with a Sevilla-Betis, to then have games every single game after that. So we'll have to see, but it looks like it could well be the La Liga at first, out of the big ones. And even Lyon is trying to take leg one to leg on to court, but I don't think they'll change the position of the government to actually, in my eyes, they rushed the decision and now they're going to have to live by it. But they're going to find the same situation in August or September, whenever they wanted to start next season. So how they sort that out, it'll be interesting, but it looks like they won't come back. And in terms of David Silva, I said last week that the plan of Manchester City is to get two centre-backs, one of which could play, or both even, as centre midfielders, but they are sorted, they think, in the centre midfield. Yes, Silva is going, but Foden will have more time, obviously. He's growing into the role, and they need a fullback. Hence the possibility or the suggestion to Barcelona of swapping Cancelo for Semedo. They trust that Semedo could do a bigger job That was discussed not only in January, but this summer as well. At the moment, is out of the question as Barcelona is trying to use Semedo in the swap deal for Pjanic at the Siglio from Juventus. So that's and that's about it. They trust that they have the forwards and the midfielders that they need to compete for everything again, and I'm sure they will. That's it. There will be more next week, of course. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe and everything. Don't forget, pass the word, as we are growing very fast at the moment. Cheers, bye.